If you've ever wanted to throw your Cricut out the window because weeding takes forever, vinyl doesn't cooperate, and Cricut Design Space makes you want to scream, these 25 beginner Cricut hacks will save you time, money, and frustration. And be sure to stick around until the end because my bonus hacks are some of the weirdest and the most useful. So let's jump in. Sometimes when we have a project that has a very intricate layout or small letters and small additions to the design, we don't want to lose all of those when we're weeding the standard way. So what we can do is called reverse weeding. And so there's two ways to start this off. You can first remove the full layer over top of the design. Like I could pull this whole thing off here, but I've got a bunch of little small elements and I'm worried that they're going to come off with the design. So I'm actually going to pull my transfer tape over top of my design first. Now when you're using this, you want to be using a transfer tape that is either medium or high tack so that it holds on to the design well. Sometimes I find I like to reuse my transfer tape for projects so I don't throw it away after the first use, and you want to be sure that it's only been used maybe once or twice so that it doesn't lose its tack, because we need everything to stick well. Once we have this on our design, what you can do is you can place this onto a cutting mat so that the non-sticky side of your transfer tape is sticking onto the cutting mat so it stays in place. And now we're going to simply give this a little bit of a squish down here to make sure everything stays in place on our transfer tape. And we're going to start removing this layer by layer. So first you can remove the carrier sheet. We don't need that anymore. And then we're going to remove the outer layer. You can pull out the little bits in between the letters first if you'd like, or you can do it last. I like to do it last. And so we're just going to pull off the vinyl from our transfer tape. Now everything should come out nicely off of this. You might need to help it along with your weeding tool in some spots because this one's got like some fancy swirls in the letters. And we're just going to do it slowly so that everything comes off like it's supposed to. And you'll see here that all of my little lines are staying on the transfer tape. Now I've got most of my design already weeded. And now I'm simply going to use my weeding tool to pull out the sections of the text that have bubbles in them. So like the A and the D. This method works really well when you have intricate designs because it helps all the little bits stay in place, like the dot on the I and these little lines around the hearts. And now that I've removed all of my vinyl that I don't need, I'm going to pull this off of my cutting mat and it's ready to apply to my project. And now all I need to do is place this onto my project and it's ready to go. If you've ever spent 10 minutes trying to line up vinyl perfectly, this next trick might be even more useful. Sometimes when we have a project that we have a specific spot that we need to apply our vinyl onto, the application can be a bit tricky. So what I find that, and this works really well when you have a sentiment that needs to go onto cardstock. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a trick. What I do is I grab a piece of painter's tape and I tape the back of my cardstock and I tape it to my workstation. Let's make sure that this doesn't move around while I'm working. Next, I grab a piece of parchment paper so that I can see where I'm working. If you have a dark workstation and you are using dark cardstock, this will be harder to see. So that's why I'm currently working on my white tabletop and using my black cardstock here. And all we do is we grab our vinyl and our transfer tape and we place it on top of the design where it's supposed to go. And you'll notice that this doesn't stick to my parchment paper, so I can align it to where I need it to go. And I'm just going to pull the edge of my parchment paper here so that it's all nicely located where I want it to be. And I'm going to slowly pull this up to make sure. And I've got a little bit of an edge here that I can attach to my table, and I'm going to make sure this is in the right spot. I'm slowly going to pull the parchment paper away. And now this is in the right spot, and I'm going to apply it down. And it's a perfect fit every time. And then all I need to do is remove my transfer tape. Just gonna give this a good squish down so that everything stays. And then all I need to do is remove my transfer tape. And my design is done. This hack might look complicated, but once you see it, you'll probably start using this on almost every layered project. When you have a multicolored design that you want to work with, but it needs to be lined up so that it all fits together, there's a little trick that I like to do. And we're going to add some markers onto this design so that we can easily attach this to our design later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a square. I'm going to make it smaller so that it's not super huge. And I'm going to make 4 of them because I've got 4 colors in this design. I've got the yellow, the red, the blue, and this gold color. And so I'm going to make 4 of these. I'm just going to copy and paste 4 so that I have 4. Once we have our 4 squares together, we're going to select them all and we're going to align them and we're going to center them. Now, before we move them, I'm just going to move my hat down a little bit so I can place my stars up top, because that way I'll waste a little bit less yellow paper later. And I'm just going to place these up above my hat here. And I'm going to work one piece at a time. I'm going to grab my hat first and I'm going to ungroup this so that I can work with each element of the hat. I'm going to grab my first square and I'm going to change the color to match the yellow of the hat topper. And I'm going to select that square and the hat topper and I'm going to attach them. And now I'm going to move them off to the side. I'm going to grab again, I'm going to move to my next square on the top. And again, I'm going to change the color. This time we're going to go to red. And I'm going to attach the red, grab the red square and the red stripes, and I'm going to attach them. And I'm simply holding Shift on my keyboard when I'm clicking on the layers panel. Okay, so now we're going to go to the next black square, which will be changing to this gold color. We're going to grab the gold square and the gold dots, and we're going to attach them and move them over as well. Finally, we're going to grab this last square and we're going to change it to blue, and we're going to grab the blue square and the blue stripes and we're going to attach them. And now this is ready to be cut out. So this is a good way to set up our design so that we can cut this out and attach this and layer this nicely. I'm quickly going to cut this out on my machine and we will reconvene in a moment at the workstation. But you'll notice here each piece is now going to be cut out with a marker on the design. Now that we have our 4 pieces cut out, we're going to start to layer this one piece at a time before we apply this to our final design. So I'm going to start off with my little party hat topper, and I'm just going to apply this to my transfer paper, and I'm going to do one piece at a time. I'm going to pull this off and make sure that my marker is still where it's supposed to be, and I'm going to go on to the next piece. Next, I'm going to work with my orange piece. Now, from before, we were using our parchment paper, and I'm going to use that again this time just to help me line up my markers so that they all are in the right spot. So you see if I move it around, it's not in the right spot. I'm going to line this up where it belongs, and now I'm going to attach my transfer paper to my workstation, and I'm going to pull this off and place this on top. Now I've got another piece of my design ready. Gonna squeegee this onto my carrier sheet, and I'm going to repeat this process 2 more times until I have the whole design on my transfer paper. I'm going to cut off this extra little bit here that I don't need so that I don't forget to take this off when I'm applying this to my design. And we're going to place the party hat onto a card here. Just going to hold this in place with my transfer tape that I didn't use earlier. And we're just going to place this on here nicely. And now that everything is on our card, we're slowly going to remove the transfer tape so that our card is ready to go. Some of these dots don't want to stay today. And now we have a nice birthday card with a party hat on it. The one thing that I don't like about this method is that you can end up wasting a bunch of vinyl between the layers and your marker. And even though with practice you can't get this to be perfect, you will notice here that my marker was just a smidgen off in a few spots. So it's not perfectly lined up, but it's much better than if I had tried to just eyeball this. Another method that you can use for applying vinyl is called the taco method. Now this is fantastic for when you're applying vinyl to cards or to cardstock, but I do like to tape down my cardstock because when I'm using large pieces of transfer tape, the static electricity between the two often causes the card to come up or the paper to come up, and we don't want that. So the taco method, all you do is you fold your design into a sort of a taco like so, and so that it is very narrow and thin, and then you can place it down where you would like, and this avoids having bubbles in your design. And so we just simply place it down like so, and then our design is on our cardstock, and then we have a nice design where we would like it. And now we have no bubbles in our design. Now that your projects are lining up perfectly, let's make sure we're not wasting material. Let's talk about vinyl organization. If you want, you can organize your vinyl like this in a bin with everything all together the way that I like to do it. Or you can one up your game and help yourself save your scraps and use them more effectively by organizing them. You can organize them by color in Ziploc bags if you'd like, and that way you know what you've got, and you just need to write what you have on your bag so that you know what you have and how to work with the vinyl. Or you can put it into paper sleeves and have it sorted by color as well. If you have it sorted by color, you will be more likely to use the scraps instead of starting a new piece every time. Sometimes when you're working in Cricut Design Space, you might want to work on more than one project at a time. Now, when you are on a computer or a Mac with your Cricut Design Space, what you can do is if you have a project that's already open, you can find these three dots, click on the File drop-down menu, and then click New Window. This will allow you to open a new Cricut Design Space window, and then you can go to add a new project, and we're going to go blank canvas. And now I've got two versions of Cricut Design Space open, so I can work on two projects at the same time. Now this comes in very handy if I want to be cutting out two projects, one after the other. I can work on one, cut it out, and then start working on another one while this first one is still cutting. And so this works really great with other projects that I want to be working on. By the way, if you're getting value from these hacks, leave me a comment below and let me know how long you've been using your Cricut for. Are you brand new or have you been crafting for years? I'm always curious to know where you are in your Cricut journey. Sometimes when we are using our text feature, we want to write out a sentiment in, and I really like to use cursive. But what I find is that when these are very small, these little connecting points become very small within the design, and it makes it very hard to cut these out, especially with cardstock. So something that I would like to do with this is I'm going to show you. I'm just going to keep this one here as my reference point, and I'm going to copy and duplicate this one so that I have two of these. And just so that we don't forget which one this is, I'm going to make this a different color. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch this out so it's super, super big and even bigger. Okay, I'm going to scroll out so this is super big. Now, I'm going to combine this all. I'm going to weld this all, unite this all together so it's one sort of bunch of words. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my offset feature under Effects. And I'm going to select Offset. And when this is very big, this looks big around it, but we can make it a little bit smaller if we'd like, just maybe like so. Because when we look here between the T and the H, there is still a line. And now I'm going to apply that. And what I have now is I have this happy birthday in a thicker outline than I had originally. And I'm going to now shrink this down to be the same size as my original text. And it still says happy birthday, but the text now is thicker. So if I cut this out with my Cricut, it will be easier to cut out. And it still is visibly says happy birthday. Now, if I had done that with this one here, and I had just gone to my Effects and Offset and did an offset, I'd have to do it itty bitty little, like you can barely even get that to show up as an offset there. And if we do that and we pull it away, it's not as crisp. Like you can see the A doesn't have a nice little hole. The gap between the T and the H is much smaller. These P's aren't very happy. They're a little bit sadder. So that's one way that we can make our text and our fonts thicker so that they cut out nicer with Cricuts. Quick question. Have you tried any of these hacks yet? Let me know in the comments if you're using some of these already or which ones are new to you. I want to show you a neat trick that I like to do when I have my designs. And so this lime here that I have has the outer layer, it has the inner layer, which also has all the little sort of seedy bits or the little grainy bits within inside the lime. But what if I wanted to have my lime sort of multicolored, but I don't want to duplicate or waste too much paper? So I'm going to quickly ungroup my design here. I'm going to work with this lime bit that I have. This piece here gets cut out in a green color, and this is a different green color, but I want these inner bits, some of them to be different colors. And so what I can do is I can duplicate this lime, and so that I have two to work with. So this will be my lime sort of body. I'm going to take this piece here, I'm going to select the contour button. And what's neat about this is that I can actually turn off the layers, and so now I can change these designs. So right now that outer layer that I had is turned off, and I'm going to turn off every other one as well. And so now I have 4 that are still on, and I'm going to apply this, and now I've got this design here. The cool thing that I can do now is that I can change the color and maybe make this a darker green so that when I put this on to overlay this here, it's going to look like this. Now I can go back over onto this one and hide all of these little seeds that I don't need from the these dark green ones now, or I can hide those dark green ones in the originals. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide these greens in the original so that they are not visible, and they'll show up from the original green number that I had. Now, one thing to remember when you're doing contouring is that you cannot hide everything. You always need to have one layer visible, or you need to have one element visible. You can't turn everything off. Now, sometimes when you're pushing too many buttons here, too many things turn off. So you just need to be careful with that. And now I've got this design here where I can put this over here and have a different design. And if I wanted to, I could use different colors on each layer and add some more character to this lime. So that's a pretty neat feature that I like to do with the contour without having to reproduce drawings or remake portions in different colors. When you have a design that's multiple layers, like this lime that I have here, this lime has a background and a foreground, which is the design of it, but you don't want to cut it out in multiple layers. You want to maybe do a print and cut so that you can make some stickers, or you want to cut this out as one element to put onto a card. What you can do is you can select both of the elements by clicking and dragging, or selecting them on your layers panel and holding shift. And what you then go and do is select the flatten button. This is going to change the look of this image, and now it is all one item. So you'll notice here in our design, it is one item and it says print then cut. So now this will cut out as one piece. And so even if I go to my cutting mats, you'll notice that this is one piece and not two. And so it only comes out on a print then cut. And this is a pretty neat trick that you can do with a lot of designs that are designed to be cut up by layers, but you can cut them out then as a print then cut instead. Of course, even the best design doesn't help much if you're fighting your mat every step of the way. If you use your cutting mats a lot, or if you keep them in places that aren't protected, they can get very dirty. And as you can see here, my mat's covered in everything. And so there's a few ways that we can clean our mats to get them back to decent shape. The first thing that I typically use for bigger pieces of paper that I have left on my mat is my spatula, and I'll just slowly pull up the big pieces with it like that so that I've got them removed. And typically when my mat is sticky, these will have a little bit more resistance, but my mat is really dirty right now, so everything comes off pretty easily with my spatula. Now when we've got bigger dusty areas, another thing that we can use is our lint roller. Now this is good to pull off big pieces, and you can see my lint roller is already getting really dirty. The only problem with this is that it won't pull off all the little itty bitty pieces that are stuck in between the bits of the mat. So I'm going to pull off most of the big pieces with my lint roller so that I've got less cleaning to do with my other methods. So if you have big fluffy bits on your mat, you can just use this, and this will remove any dirt, but you'll notice that the mat is still very dirty. So your next option, if that hasn't worked, is baby wipes. Now baby wipes are great, but they can require you to use a lot of elbow grease. And so all you want to do is grab a moist baby wipe and sort of start to spin it in a circle in the area where you want to clean. And you're just going to slowly move your way across the cutting board or the cutting mat. So you'll see here on my baby wipe, it's already pulling off a lot of dirt, and you'll even see in this area here, it's much cleaner. And so I'm just going to focus on these little squares here so that we can see how it gets cleaned, but this does require a lot of elbow grease. Okay, so I've cleaned up these two rows here, and you can see that they're significantly cleaner than the rest of the mat, but they're still pretty dirty. And they do have some stick, but you have to wait until they completely dry before they will be tacky again to use on your mat. But just cleaning these two rows took me about 10 minutes with the baby wipe, and that's going to be a lot of work in order to clean the full mat. So the last option that we have for cleaning our mat is using dish soap. Typically what I'll do is I'll use a scrub brush that I have for dishes, but this one is specifically I use only for my cleaning mats, and I'll use green Palmolive dish soap. I always have it in a smaller container because I buy it in bulk. So I'm going to move into my sink and wash these, and all I do is I soak this in warm water, not hot water, and I'm going to put soap onto my mat, and I'm just going to go around in circles over the whole mat. This takes less time than using the baby wipes, but it still takes a few minutes to get the mat done. Once I'm happy with how clean the mats are, I quickly wash off all the soap, and then what I like to do is I like to place them onto clothes hangers so that they can dry nicely, and I put them onto my drying rack so that they all dry at the same time. And now that my mats are clean, I can just cut my projects without any issues. The one thing that I like to do with my mats is on my protective covers, I like to apply a vinyl design so that I know which side is up and which side is down. I find that this way any dust or dirt will always be on the same side, and the bottom side of the protective cover will always be clean and only touching the mat. And so I do this for all of my covers, and then that way I have a nice idea of where they go. And so I'm going to put these all away now that they're all nice and clean. And finally, there does come a time where your mat is so used and so disgusting that it no longer sticks, and no matter how much washing you do, it just won't work anymore. And that's the time to throw it away, and that's totally okay. Be honest, how many of you are hanging onto your mats well past retirement age? I know I'm not the only one. Sometimes if your mat's not sticky enough and you're too lazy to clean it, or if you want to use a piece of scrap vinyl that you have that's all bent out of shape, what I like to do is use painter's tape to hold it down into place. And the more out of shape the design is, or the less sticky your mat is, the more tape you're going to need. But all you need to do is just apply some painter's tape to the edges of your design and make sure that it holds on to the mat as well. And I like to do this in lots of areas, specifically in the corners, which I find are the least sticky regardless of how clean or not clean my mat is. And then you want to make sure that you're grabbing this whole design and holding it down, because if your Cricut pulls the design in all the way, it's going to get snagged on these bits. Also, an important thing to note is when you're doing this, you don't want your design to be in the area of where the tape is, because that will cause the cut not to be perfect and you might not get the full cut in those areas. Now you can just cut out a smaller portion if that's what you're using, but I'm going to use this whole piece, so I will cut out what I don't need later. And now my design is cut out. Sometimes we're going to want to cut our projects out on holographic or shiny paper. And I find that when you are working with this type of material, the ideal way to cut this is to cut this face down. Now, there's a bunch of reasons why this works better, because you're not going to scratch up the front of your design, but also after we remove the design, especially if it's a more intricate design on our cutting mat, there will be leftover imperfections on our design. So we want to place this face down onto our cutting mat, and then we're going to place it into our Cricut. And I will typically cut this type of holographic cardstock as regular cardstock because it's not very thin, but you may need to do some test runs for holographic cardstock before you cut your final project. And now our holographic heart is cut out. And you'll notice here on the front of our holographic paper, it is nice and smooth. You don't see any imperfections at the corners. Now it's a little bit hard to see, but in the corner here of this heart and here, there's a little bit of a jagged edge because of the way that the paper cuts, and that will be on the underside of our design, so it's not going to affect the way that our heart looks on the front. Now, something that's important to remember when we are cutting out on our holographic paper, if you are doing shiny side down, you need to make sure to mirror your design in Cricut Design Space. Now, for these ones, since these are just simply hearts, I didn't need to, but if you are doing a sentiment, for example, or a shape that is directional, you will need to make sure that you mirror it so that you get the nice side facing the right direction. When I cut out my glitter cardstock, I always like to place it face down onto my cutting mat. This allows the design to be cut out better. Now, regardless of if I cut glitter cardstock face up or face down, the corners of any design will get a little bit of an imperfect cut on them. And it's better to keep that imperfect cut on the back side so that you don't end up seeing what that is on the front. Now, it looks like a little tear or a snag on the paper, and it will actually change the way that the design looks on your project. So whenever I cut my glitter cardstock, I always cut it face down. I love cutting glitter cardstock, but the problem is that this leaves a huge mess on your cutting mats. And as you saw earlier in my video, there was lots of glitter on my cardstock. Because what I do when I cut cardstock is I cut it face down so that the design on the back of the cardstock has all the imperfections on it, and the front, where it's all glitter, looks beautiful. And I've left a link for a video here where I show you exactly how to do this whole process the way that I normally do. But a cool other trick that we can do when we are doing this is, since we just spent a whole lot of time cleaning our mats, and if you don't want to clean your mats, you can grab some strong grip transfer tape and place it onto your cutting mat. And so I'm using a strong grip cutting mat so that it holds onto the transfer tape, because the standard grip ones don't always hold onto it very well. And I'm simply going to cut a section that fits the design that I need, so I'm not wasting too much transfer tape. And I'm simply going to place this onto my cutting mat as if it was vinyl. And I'm going to stick it down where it can go here. Now, if you are doing a design with glitter cardstock, make sure that you're mirroring it unless you have like a simple shape like a heart like we're doing. But if it's a text, you want to make sure, or a sentiment, you want to make sure that you have it mirrored so that you do not cut it in the wrong direction. Now I'm just pushing this down as hard as I can to make sure I get rid of any air bubbles that may be hiding under the vinyl. And I'm going to pull off the carrier sheet. And now this is going to be super sticky. So what I need to do next is I'm simply going to place my glitter cardstock face down. Now this is super sticky transfer tape, so it will hold on to this. And I'm going to be simply cutting this on my glitter cardstock setting so that it cuts nicely. And now my design comes off beautifully with no imperfections on the glitter. And you can sort of see here at the corner of my heart that there is a little bit of a blemish that we don't see now on the front. And I have all the glitter is on my transfer tape so that when I take this off later, my mat will still be clean. I don't need to wash it again. Now let's move on from cutting these projects to actually putting them onto surfaces without ruining them. Sometimes when we have solid flat designs, what can happen is you can get air bubbles stuck inside of the design and your surface. And so oftentimes you don't want that to happen because that looks a little bit ugly, right? And so there's a simple way that we can do this. Just using a water that's got a mist spray on it. Just want to give your area a little bit of a spray so that it is moist. Now you can have a little bit of soap in here if you want, but it's not needed. And then we're going to simply place our design on top. This water inside on here on our surface allows us to massage any air bubbles out so that they're not stuck into our design or under our vinyl. Now it takes a while for this to dry, and we can still move this around a little bit with the water on top, but this allows us to slowly move any air bubbles out if they're inside. Now you'll notice here I've got a few air bubbles still on the design, and since it's still wet, I can push these out with my scraper, and then they will be completely out and not ruining my design. Now you'll notice that these are spitting out some water with them. That's where we would have had an air bubble, and that's okay. So I'm just going to slowly work these out so that I don't have any residual bubbles left in my design. Now when you're doing this method, you do need to wait for the vinyl to the water to completely evaporate from underneath, and it might take a little while, but you will have a design that has no air bubbles in it at the end. Whenever I'm applying vinyl to any surface, what I do is I clean the surface with isopropyl alcohol. Now I buy bigger bottles of it because I use a lot, and if you're a crafter, this is a better bang for your buck. But you can also use little alcohol wipes that come in individually wrapped. And all I do with this is I grab my isopropyl alcohol and a paper napkin or a paper towel, and I just rub the surface with the isopropyl alcohol to clean off any grease or germs or smudges that might be on there, and then I let it dry out. And now this is going to be ready for application. I just gotta let it dry, and you'll notice that this is drying slowly here. You can sort of see it disappearing. Now the one thing to keep in mind is that if you're using isopropyl alcohol on plastics, like if you are using it on clear Christmas ornaments, you need to do a test run on it to make sure that it's not going to ruin the finish or make the plastic become cloudy, because that can happen in some of the projects. So just make sure that you give it a test wipe beforehand, because you don't want to ruin the project before you've even started. Sometimes when we're working on projects, we need to place it in a specific spot where we need it. And so there's what's called the Hinge method. Now this works great for large projects, but can also be done on small projects. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my washi tape here on the center of my design so that I know where it's going. And I'm going to place this where I want it to go onto my project, and I'm going to just cover this up here. And so now this is where it's going to go, and all I need to do is pull my design up. I'm going to pull my carrier sheet off the back of my design, and I'm going to cut this off with my scissors if I can, because they don't seem to be working. And then I place my design onto the paper or onto my book where it needs to go, and then I'm going to take off the other sheet side of the transfer tape or the carrier sheet and place my design onto my design here. And now I can take off my transfer paper, and my design is in the spot where I need it to be exactly perfectly where I want. Now this works fantastic for larger projects that you need to center on like a canvas or onto a wooden board. I like to do this for smaller projects as well, just to get it where I need it so that it looks perfect. I'd love to know which application method saves you the most frustration. When you have cut out your projects, and especially if it's on cardstock, you need to make sure that when you're pulling it off of your mat, you're pulling the mat away from the project and not the other way around. Because what's going to happen is if you do it the other way, you are going to curl your paper, and you don't want that. Now with projects such as with vinyl, you don't need to as much, but it is still beneficial because you don't want your project curling the wrong way. And now this card, it doesn't have any curls in it that I need to worry about. I just need to pull out all these pieces that are in the design now. But my card is now flat and straight like I want it to be. I know I said 25, but here are a few bonus hacks that almost nobody talks about. If you're ever trying to place a design onto a cup or a tumbler, you'll notice that it rolls around, and it can be very difficult to keep it in place. One trick that I like to do is I like to tape 2 vinyl roll cardboard tubes together. Now if you don't have any surplus tubes from your HTV vinyl, you can just use the cardboard tubes from toilet paper rolls or even from paper towel rolls, and then just tape them together so that they hold in place. And then you can put your cup on top and it won't move around. Now all we need to do now is then we can place our design onto our cup, and it's not going to move. Now we can use the taco method that we talked about before and place this down onto our cup, and it will be perfectly aligned. To typically when I'm weeding, I like to use my weeding tools, but sometimes they're just not what I'm looking for. But also, you'll notice that after time, they will start to like deform, and it doesn't matter if you're using vinyl or whatever, over time they will start to bend. And that's why I have so many of them. You can get no-name brands, you can get Cricut brand ones, but they will start to deform, and you can find that this gets to be costly. A solution that you have that you can use is just using a mechanical pencil. And this works just like a weeding tool. And this saves you from having to buy a specific weeding pencil, which costs a little bit more money. Now, you want the pencil to have the lead come out just a smidgen so that it holds the metal bit of your pencil out, or the metal point of your pencil out, so that you can weed this very easily. And if you don't want to use your weeding tool or your mechanical pencil, you can always purchase weeding pencils online, and I've left a link for those below as well, but they can be a little bit pricey, and if we've already got the tools that we need at home, then maybe we don't need to buy some more. When we are in Cricut Design Space, we have a few options for how we can cut our items. So I have this orange here that I've designed, and I'm going to select Make It. And when I go into the cutting mat area, you're going to notice that my orange is on two sheets. I've got the one piece on an orange sheet and the other one on a different orange sheet. But sometimes I don't want to cut it out on two mats, but I want to arrange it so that I can cut it once. And so even though I'm going to use different colors of paper, I want them on the same cutting mat. So what I do is I click on these three circles, and I'm going to select the Move Objects here. And I'm going to select to put this onto the first page of my cutting mat. And I'm going to simply pull and drag this over and put this into a spot where I have space for it on the original mat. When I'm doing this, even though it's showing up that it's going to be cut on the same cutting mat, I can actually place a piece of vinyl or cardstock that's going to fit into this area here on the one corner, and that will be the inner part of my orange. And then I can do the same thing for the outer part of my orange so that I can cut this once on my cutting mat instead of having to use two mats. This will save a little bit of time when I'm working on my projects. All right, that was 25 Cricut hacks every beginner needs to know, plus a few bonus ones just because I couldn't help myself. Let me know down below which of these hacks made you stop and say, wait a minute, why didn't I know about this before? Was it the parchment paper, the reverse weeding, Cricut Design Space shortcut, or was it one of the bonus hacks? And if you've got your own Cricut hack that I didn't mention in this video that can save us time, money, and frustration, be sure to leave it in the comments below so that everyone in the community can learn about it. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, I've got a few other Cricut videos for you here. Thanks so much for watching, and happy crafting!